Hello everyone. Welcome to At America. I am Andrea, one of the e-guides here, and I hope everyone is doing well today. If you're new here, At America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. Our event today is called GED Test Preparation: Reasoning Through Language Arts. But before we jump into today's event, I would like to give a little trivia question of the day. What is the average percentage of people who pass the GED test every year? Is it A, 70%, B, 85%, C, 75%, or D, 80%? You can submit your answer to our social media platforms, and if you are able to answer correctly, you will be receiving a shout out later from us in the end of the event. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our facilitator for today, Zakaria Shatkam, GED Qualified Instructor. For Mr. Zakaria, the time is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Hello and welcome everyone to another session of GD Prep Class by At America. And this is the 9th session. I hope this is not your first time attending the GD Prep classes. And I have shared my screen. I hope you can see it. Yep, you can. One of the most repeated questions since the pandemic. Anyway, so this is session 9 in the last 8 sessions. In the first 7 sessions, we talked about reading. We kind of went over reading comprehension in general, and we talked about reading nonfiction texts and analyzing them. And in the last session, we talked about reading fiction texts, which is a lot more interesting than reading nonfiction texts. Anyway, so you can see my screen. This is session 9. And let's go to the first slide. This is basically everything that we have studied so far can be seen here. Some of the subtopics or subtitles of, some not main parts. Some subparts are not mentioned here, but you can see all the titles of the main topics that we have studied so far. And I don't think there is any need to go over them again because we will run out of time if I do so. But if you do want to see recaps, please go and refer to the previous session's videos, and you will definitely find recaps for all of the topics here. Great. Now, this is previous session. We talked about nonfiction and we talked about fiction, and also we talked about all main genres and subgenres. The main genres are nonfiction, fiction, drama, poetry, folklore, and subfictions. You can see them on the screen. So this is a recap of previous session. In the last session, we went over, as I said in the previous slide, main genres and subgenres. We also talked about theme. We want to talk about inference, but unfortunately, we did not have enough time. It's fine, we'll talk about inference today. So main genres and subgenres, we said that there are 5 main genres, as you can see on this slide. And each main genre has, subgenres that you can identify them from the text that you read. It doesn't really matter. If it's a nonfiction text, you can definitely identify them as one of the subgenres of nonfiction texts. And if it's a fiction text, of course, there are different types of fiction texts, but mainly, these 4. And drama, of course, they are meant to be played on stage. Poetry, concerned with the beauty of language. It doesn't really matter what language it is. If you write poems in any language, you'll notice that the poets have tried to use, the most beautiful words to describe whatever they want to describe, or they're trying to describe maybe. So folklore, this is covered. And folklore, we said that when stories are handed down from one generation to another, kind of are told from older generations to the new ones, we call them folklores. And then there are 4 subgenres: fairy tale, has magic and everything. Fable has a moral, has a lesson. Myth talks about creation, especially about how everything came into existence, like the world, earth, and mostly includes God or gods, like in Greek gods, Norse gods, and all. So legends, we said that at some point they might have been true, but they are so exaggerated that right now when you hear them, you kind of find them incredible. You find them unbelievable. And also there is another one. It's the subgenre of folklore. It's tall tale. Tall tale is basically part of they are set up in Wild West and everything is exaggerated. Like, this person could do this. Basically, kind of everything seems to be boasted. Like, this one person could wrestle with 100 people, but still wouldn't lose. Things like that. Those are tall tale, which I don't think you will see during GED test. That's why it's not included. Anyway, that is the recap of main genres and subgenres. Theme, we said theme is much bigger than the topic itself. It's basically kind of, it asks you to make connections between the real world and the text that you read and try to learn, find a lesson to learn from the text. We said that, okay, if you think of what the author is trying to tell you, if you think about the main idea, that's what the author is discussing in the text. Though the theme is the biggest point or the biggest lesson that you can learn from the text. I think that boy's name was Eric, the one who slept, who kind of set up the alarm at PM instead of AM and did not prepare lunch. We talked about that. Yep. And then we also mentioned that if you want to understand the theme, you have to first understand the topic and then the main idea, and then, of course, supporting details. And then through that, you can understand the theme. We wanted to talk about inference, but we could not, unfortunately, which is why we will cover it today. So today's session concerns inference and story structure. Inference is really easy. We have talked about this in the non-fiction part of GED, or in reading, I think it was reading non-fiction texts, we were session 3 or 4. We talked about it. We said that inference basically means you have to make logical conclusions based on evidence, based on examples, based on information, or based on the main idea. You will definitely be asked to make inferences based on maybe 2 sentences or 1 paragraph, but mostly the inferences will require you to understand the main idea and the biggest idea, which is the theme of the text. We are going to talk about story structure. Story structure, basically every story that you read, if they do not have a structure, that they basically sound like someone is rambling, just keeps talking, but is not making any sense. The part of the speech seems to have no point, to have no beginning, no kind of climax, or no ending as well. We are going to talk about that. Now it's inference time. Anyway, so as I said, it's a logical conclusion based on logical reasoning and evidence. We talked about evidence. We said that there are different types of evidence. We had statistics. We had examples, experts' opinions. We had logical reasoning. And we said that the statistics have numbers, definitely. We said that facts or claims by the author should be supported by evidence, and we mentioned statistics. We mentioned all of that. Anyway, that's easy. That's repetitive. I'm not going to go through that again. But logical reasoning is a very interesting So because you are using logical twice, once your own logic to kind of see what the author is saying. For instance, I think in the inference session that we had, or when we discussed inference during nonfiction text, I mentioned when you read someone's text and you kind of infer from what they are implying by their use of words, or sentences, or the way they speak, then you infer, you read between the lines, and you make a logical conclusion as to what they are actually saying. Let's say if someone says that they are busy, at home, no, they don't want to go out with you, or to hang out with you, then you definitely know they don't want to do that. So those are the logical conclusions that we come to based on the reasons and based on the implications made by whoever is the author, whoever is the point of contact. Anyway, so inference, that is inference. What we do is first we read. Okay, I think you can see my video clearly. I have it like this. So first is you read the text, or any text. You read a text. It doesn't really matter whether it's fiction or non-fiction, whether it's poem or not. It doesn't really matter. So you read a text, and after that, you analyze the text. As we talked about, you can analyze text by going through their structure, by going through the word choice. What choice? Not what. Okay. Okay. Word choice. You analyze the word choice, and you see what conclusion they come to. You find out the main idea, of course. And after finding out the main idea and, of course, supporting details, you read the conclusion. And after reading and understanding a text completely, then you make an inference. You infer based on the implications made. In the next slide, there's going to be an example, so it's fine if you don't get it now. And this is, of course, a fiction text, because we are learning fiction text. So let's read this together. And yep, a crack. That's the sound. Thunder struck and rain poured. Max stared blankly out the window, trying to contain his emotions that raged like the weather. He was beginning to lose it, dropping the kite from his hand. Max broke out into full sobs. His mother comforted him. There, Max. We'll just find something else to do. She began to unpack the picnic basket that was on the counter and offer him a sandwich. Max snapped. I don't want a sandwich. That's my child voice. A flash from the sky lit up the living room. Boom. From side. Okay. So after reading this story, you see these questions. These are the type of questions you'll be asked during GED tests. They are not explicitly, or they're not directly stated in the text. So their answers, if you go through the text, you will not find a sentence saying Max was upset because of this, right? You have to infer. You have to read between the lines. You have to understand the text and make a logical conclusion based on the text, either through logical reasoning that's provided in the text or through the evidence and examples provided in the text. So why is Max upset? If you know the answer to this, please write down in the chat box. At any point, if you feel like you know something and you want to answer a question, please feel free to do so. Okay? Anyway, So this one, why Max is upset. Okay, I don't see any answers anyway. So why is Max upset? If you read the text, so Max, let's go and read the sentences where Max is mentioned. I'm going to highlight them. Max stared blankly out the window. Okay, this is his action, trying to contain his emotions that raged like the weather. So in here we know that. Yes, great response. Fantastic. Great. Yes, keep them. Yeah, please keep them coming. So yes. So trying to contain his emotions that raged like the weather. From here we know that Max is upset or angry. He's enraged. You know, he was beginning to lose it, kind of almost to the point of breaking. Dropping the kite from his hand, and two, Mom was planned to have a children. Fantastic. Yes, that is correct. So he was beginning to lose it, right? So if I ask you to prove, what you are saying, what is the proof of Max, of the reason that you have chosen for Max to be upset? Is of course you can see that he dropped his kite. That means he was actually planning to go out and play with his kite, right? So, dropping his kite from his hand, Max broke out into full sobs. So this is the reason he was, sad, enraged. And finally, because Max, assuming from this text, Max's age is not mentioned here, but we know Max is a kid, right? Just by reading this. Max is a kite, wants to play, and he can't go outside to play with his kite. That's why he starts crying. Like an adult usually doesn't do that. Anyway, we know Max is a kid, even though that's not a question here, but we know that by reading the text. This is called inferring. When we infer, we know that. We read between the lines, we analyze the text. Anyway, so and then finally his mother comforted him. There, Max will find something else to do, right? So, means that they both were planning to do something, which again kind of implies Max's mom also had a plan to go out. She began to unpack the picnic basket that was on the counter and offer him a sandwich. See, unpacking the picnic basket means that she previously had packed the picnic basket. Okay, now she's unpacking the basket. And kind of tries to comfort Max. So we know that Max's mom was planning to go outside for a picnic, have a picnic, and she had packed a basket. And because of the bad weather and raining, they both could not go out. Therefore, Max was sad because he could not play with his kite, and of course, this makes Max's mom sad as well. Anyway, this is called inferring or making inference. The story structure. This one is really interesting because with story structure, sorry for the noise. I'm sorry, I don't even know where my phone is. So this story structure, this is of course a conventional structure, meaning that this is the traditional or the conventional way or the conventional structure or way used by authors to make up a story. So a story structure basically when different parts of a story come together in a certain way, that's called the structure. And this is the conventional way. This is what usually the authors use to write a story. If we go through them one by one, exposition or setup. So in this part of his story, if I can move my chair a bit. Anyway, in the exposition or setup part of the story, the author actually sets up the scene, sets up the scene with the environment. Okay, so the first thing the author does. The next one is introduces characters. Sometimes only the main character, but usually all the characters involved in the setup, or where the main character kind of interacts with. Anyway, the third one, so after setting up the scene, introducing characters, including the main character and side characters, the author next kind of introduces kind of a conflict as well. Usually, authors do this. If I give you an example about this, for instance, by the way, if you just read the exposition part of a story, you will notice that nothing has been happening, or nothing at least significant has been happening, and there should be something to start a story to tell. So if I give you an example of GED class, let's say one of these students is named, let's say Sarah. Sarah, if I were to tell this story, Sarah is sitting on her chair, upset, and she is upset because she wants to go to university, but since she does not have a high school diploma, she cannot go to university. So this is me setting up a scene, right, and introducing Sarah, the main character. Sarah's mom calls Sarah, Sarah, come down, it's time to eat. She screams, I don't want to eat, Mom, I'm really sad. Sarah replies. Anyway, so this is me just setting up the scene, kind of introducing a little, really small conflict, saying that Sarah is really sad, and this fact that she cannot go to university is really upsetting for her and, of course, the family. This sets up that. And then the conflict is that Sarah, introducing a conflict, and not being able to go to university. This is the conflict. And when we go to the next section, right? So that's when the story really starts. So up until now, we know the situation, we know the main character. Only mom has said one sentence, but we know that there is a mom. We know that they eat. So those are the things that we know, and that is exposition or setup of a story. If you read any story, this is the case. The next one is inciting incident. This inciting incident is the reason, or this inciting incident, whatever happens, or whatever is mentioned here, is the reason why this story is being told. If we continue that story, that made-up story that I just made, inciting incident. Inciting incident is when kind of the main incident that starts this story happens. So the incident, well, not incident. Okay. So the incident, without which, by the way, there would be no story to tell. So the incident without which there would be would be no story, or at least this story wouldn't exist. Now, if we go and introduce an incident or incite an incident for this story that I just made about Sarah being upset for not being able to go to university because she does not have a high school diploma. And then now let's incite an incident. Let's introduce an incident and on which the whole story will depend. And okay, suddenly there is a doorbell ring, and Sarah hears her friend's voice calling her. She goes to the window and says, what should be the friend's name? Jasmine. Jasmine, hey, what are you doing? I'm upstairs. What do you want to do? Do you want to go out or whatever? And then she says, no, I have a really great news for you. Sarah, oh, what kind of news? And then Jasmine replies, I think there is a way for you to get a high school equivalent diploma and to go to university. This is when an incident or whatever that the story is going to depend on is introduced. Sarah replies, really? What is it? Jasmine says, there is this GED program, this General Education Development Program, which has 4 tests, and after passing those 4 tests, you can get your diploma and apply to universities, and most universities in the world, especially in the Americas, all American countries, on the continent of America, of course, like the US, Canada, Mexico, probably. They accept. Oh, really? Sarah replies. Oh, come on, tell me more about it. Anyway, so this is inciting an incident to this story. This is, and also this tells us that the story is going to be about GED program, about Sarah preparing for GED or whatever. We know that GED, getting GED probably, hopefully, Sarah, is where the story is going to be focused on. I'll give you another example. Let's mention someone named Jim. Jim, I think, is one of the names that we have used a lot in this class. Well, let's mention Jim. Jim is 93 years old. He's sitting at home watching TV, and suddenly his heart starts hurting, and he gets a bit paralyzed on his left side. We know those are symptoms of heart attack. We know, Jim is at home, and he's watching TV. He's 93. He's old, so the heart attack will probably either kill him, or he's going to make it through this heart attack or this whatever pain is causing his heart. Is hurting his heart. Anyway, so this is another setup, right? So exposition is done, heart attack, the inciting incident is introduced, and then you say, hey, Jim's granddaughter, Isabella. It's a name I might forget these names later on. I hope I don't. But anyway, Isabella kind of comes to Jim, Grandpa, 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 and then shouts and says, Mom, Mom, Grandpa is lying down and is not speaking. Isabella's mom runs upstairs and calls in the US 911. 911, what's the emergency? Anyway, so this continues and Jim's taken to hospital. You see, the scene or the whole story is set up, the conflict is introduced. Now, if this is a happy ending story, a story with a happy ending, in the first case, in Sarah's case, Sarah is going to get her GED and pass all full tests and apply to universities and hopefully get accepted. In Jim's case, if it's a happy ending story, Jim is going to hospital, he is going to be taken care of, and he is going to get well again and to kind of make it through this heart attack. If those two are happy ending stories, or stories with happy endings. But if we read tragedies, bad things will happen, even though there is a story, and even though we want the main character to, especially if the main character wants to achieve something, or the main character is going through some really difficult situation, we want the main character to make it through. But sometimes in tragedies or in tragic stories, that does not happen, meaning that the main character will end up in a worse situation than they were before. In Jim's case, the main character, Jim, either is going to be dead or at least less healthier than he was before getting this pain in the heart, if it's a tragedy. And in Sarah's case, Sarah is going to prepare for the GED, but we might introduce some really small conflicts, some really, later on we'll see this, rising action. This is some kind of, introducing some really small kind of barriers for Sarah to overcome, like, not being able to find a GED prep class, not having the money to pay for a GED prep class, or not finding a test center nearby to take the tests. Those things. Those are really small barriers created for the main character or the character, the concerned character, to overcome in order to achieve. In Jim's case, the hospital might be closed, or the kind of the specialist might not be around at the time that Jim's taken to hospital. So that is another small conflict, or a small barrier for this story, this main character's story. And the main character should overcome those conflicts. Anyway, so that is inciting incident, when an incident is introduced. Now, we know up until this point, Sarah is upset about not being able to go to university, and Sarah has heard this great news of being able to get a high school equivalent diploma, and is kind of hopeful to go to university. In Jim's case, Jim has had a heart attack, and they are on their way to a hospital. Okay, now rising action, as I mentioned. Let's continue that story. Rising action is when the tension is kind of being raised. So the tension kind of rises, right? So in Jim's case, hello, I heard someone's voice. Anyway, so in Jim's case, Jim is taken to hospital after the ambulance arrives. They want to take him to the ICU, to the emergency room, of course. But unfortunately, there is another patient in the ICU, and the hospital is small, so they have only one emergency room. And the specialist is busy with another patient. You see, this is kind of rising action, or the tension is kind of getting to rise. We're starting to rise. And now we are really concerned about Jim. Jim has had this heart attack, and now Jim is taken to hospital. Okay, that's a great news. But then there is another problem. Oh, there is only one emergency room, and the specialist who is supposed to take care of Jim is busy. What's going to happen to Jim? Now, Jim is at the hospital. This is for me, so I don't forget. Okay, Jim is at the hospital, or maybe local hospital, because it's a really small one. At the local hospital, and local hospital, great. This is a part of a positive action taken to better Jim's situation. And the problem of the kind of the small barrier for Jim to overcome for Jim's situation to get better is because the specialist is busy or is tending another patient. Busy is not maybe busy is not the right word, because you have to specify it anyway. The specialist is unavailable. Is unavailable. We know that. In Sarah's case, let's continue Sarah's story. Now, Sarah, so far we know that Sarah wants to go to university, but cannot because she does not have a high school equivalent diploma. She has heard this great news, and now she has heard everything from her friend, Jasmine. Jasmine? Was it the name? Yes. Jasmine about this GED program that she can, prepare for and get GED diploma and go to university. Okay, we know that. Now, Sarah is in search of finding a GED prep center, or GED prep class to prepare for the test. But unfortunately, her parents are not working and they don't have the money to pay for GED prep classes. This is another tension, right? They're both not working. Both parents are not working. And right now, up until this point, Sarah has not lost anything. I mean, comparing to the situation she was in before this whole GED thing started, right? But this is really tense for the audience, for the people who are reading this story at this point. And we know that, okay, we want Sarah to get her GED, but snap, there is a problem. And the problem is that parents are not working. Now you see there is another problem, or there is another incident, a kind of a slight, kind of really small problem mentioned that is not really a big one, but we know that, of course, for Sarah it is, and for this story. But it affects Sarah going to a prep class and preparing for GED. And finally, getting her GED if she works hard and if she works consistently, and if she is perseverant. Anyway, so now with Sarah's case, we know that Sarah wants to prepare for the GED. This is the positive action. Sarah wants to prepare, wants to prepare for GED. Okay, but the barrier, or the small barrier that is introduced, is that Sarah or Sarah's parents. Or Sarah cannot prepare, cannot actually admit to a prep class because her parents are not working, or Sarah's parents are not working, or Sarah's parents do not have the money to pay for the prep class, for the class. So we know that in Jim's case, at the hospital, but the specialist is unavailable. In Sarah's case, wants to prepare for GED, but cannot admit to a prep class because the parents cannot pay for the prep class. This is rising action. Now, this is the climax, the turning point. Later on, we will talk about this. There is this pyramid. So this is basically, this is exposition. This is exposition, and also setting up a conflict is also introduced here. Also, inciting incident is here, and then the rising action is here, and then the climax. This is the climax. This is where things start to turn around. Either gets better or gets worse. Let's try to make this story a happy ending story for both Jim and Sarah. Although we could, make things worse for them, let's make things good for them. Anyway, it's a climax, a turning point of this story. So far, we know that Jim is 93, right? This heart attack happens, and then he's taken to the hospital, but the specialist is unavailable. And right now, what is going to happen to Jim? Right? In Sarah's case. Sarah wants to go to university, but cannot. That is setting up the scene. She's unhappy, she's upset because she does not have a high school diploma. And inciting incident is when the friend Jasmine shows up. Jasmine shows up and tells her that there is this program that she can prepare for and get her diploma and go to university. Now, rising tension, right? In Jim's case, we talked about it. In Sarah's case, she wants to do it, but she cannot admit, or she cannot actually pay for a prep class because her parents are unemployed and don't have the money. Okay, what is going to happen to them? Now, this is the suspense, the moment of, let's say, the highest point of the story is here, right? In a non-conventional way, you might see the climax in the beginning of a movie. They say, I think I saw a movie the other day where the climax was kind of placed in the beginning. The main character was at his worst circumstance, was in the most horrible of circumstances, and kind of there was a throwback, taking the audience to where everything started, and that's when the incident and the tension were introduced. Anyway, so that is the unconventional way that you might read or you might see in movies. Anyway, so up until this point, we know everything about these two characters. The climax is here. Now it's turning point. What is going to happen here? So in Jim's case, let's say after 20 minutes, Jim's going to die if we wait 20 minutes. Let's say after a few minutes, let's not specify. After a few minutes, finally, the specialist gets out of the emergency room and tends to Jim. This is the highest point. This is the turning point, right? This is the turning point. We know that this could either save Jim or not kill him. Because the heart attack would be killing him. But anyway, this is either going to make Jim's situation better or worse. The doctor could come and say, Jim, you are going to get better. Or Jim, sorry, or Jim's family, sorry, it's too late. Right? So this is the inciting, this is the climax in Jim's case. In Sarah's case, let's say the parents, we know up until now, parents don't have money. But then the father says he is going to sell his bike in order to provide for Sarah's education, or for Sarah's GED prep class expenses. Okay, this is the climax. We know from now on either Sarah is going to be able to prepare for GED, or she is going to have to live just like she was before this incident, before the friend showed up and talked about GED program. Climax, right? And now, the next one is falling action. So this is where some of the kind of good things that happen to main characters are introduced. If it's a happy ending story, if it's sad, if it's a tragic story, or if it's a tragedy, then things are going to get worse. But generally, in tragedy, what happens is, in tragedy, the exposition is started. In tragedies, the exposition is started with the main character being in a not so bad, but also not so good situation. The inciting incident something goes really well, and then it keeps going really well, and the climax is there is a hint of something bad happening, and in the falling action, things start to go badly. So that is what usually happens in tragedies or in tragic stories, right? I'm in this situation, things keep getting better, but then they keep getting worse, and which I will talk about. This denouement resolution. In denouement resolution, which is how the story is ended. So, which is how the story is ended. That's when we will know whether the main character or the character concerned, or the character mentioned. Anyway, the character on whom the story is focused on either ends up in a better situation than they were in the beginning of the story, or they'll end up in a worse situation. So now, we know, up until now, we know the exposition, we know the situation, we know the incident, we know the rising action, we know the climax. Now let's go to falling action, right? We know that there were hints of good things happening to both Jim and Sarah. For Jim, it was that the specialist showed up and started tending to Jim, started taking care of Jim. In Sarah's case, we know that Sarah's father now has plans to sell his bike and provide for her GED prep classes expenses. Great. Now let's see how things turn out, right? Now let's talk about falling action in Jim's case. The doctor calls her his nose. Amanda, for instance. Amanda, come on. This patient is in a really critical situation and he might die. Okay, let's take him to the emergency room. And he's taken to the emergency room. And after 2 hours of trying to, Jim is you can add some other expenses, suspenses, like you can say another suspense in this case would be, oh, Jim dies. But Jim's heart stops beating, and then they resuscitate him again. They resuscitate him. I'm not saying resuscitate anyway. So that, but we don't want to introduce any other conflicts. We don't want to introduce any other small incidents or small barriers for the main character. So falling action in Jim's case, let's say, oh, Jim is taken to the emergency room and the doctor takes kind of really works really hard to get Jim better. And after 2 hours, Jim is finally back to a normal situation, and Jim's health is normal. So the situation is not critical anymore. It's great. See, things are starting to go really well for Jim. Now, Jim is taken care of by the specialist and taken care of by the specialist. Okay, that's redundant, not going to mention that. And is out of critical situation. Okay, good for Jim, right? Good for the doctor, saving the patient. Anyway, now let's go to Sarah. We can introduce, really small barriers for this story to go for in this story for the main character to overcome in order to see something good. But let's not do that. Let's not make Sarah suffer more, right? Let's see Sarah's father goes out and goes to whatever place he goes to sell the bike. And after 5 hours, he comes back with the money to provide for Sarah's education. Oh, GED prep class education, maybe bike won't be enough. I'm sorry for the noise. I have to get rid of this. Right? Anyway, sorry for the noise. So now we know that Sarah's father is out and wants to sell the bike and has come back. And now he's come back and has enough money to pay for GED prep class. Great. Now things are starting to go well for Sarah as well. So Sarah's father has sold the bike, or his bike maybe, sold his bike to provide Sarah's prep class. Okay. Okay, good. Things are starting to go well for both of them. Now, moment of final suspense. Okay, before continuing, I have to say that this is not usually the case in most stories. The case usually is, the scene is set up, an incident, something happens, and then there is some action taken for things getting worse, and also there is the highest point of tension in the story, and then the following action, something happens and things start either going well or going worse, going better or worse, and then moment of final suspense is skipped, and we see the denouement. In here, T is silent, by the way. The denouement or resolution of the story, or ending, or how the story ends or settles. So now, let's talk about moment of final suspense. This means that there is a final barrier for the characters to overcome. We can add that. Let's say for Jim's case, you can add something like, although Jim is not in a critical situation anymore, he cannot walk from now on due to the severity of the heart attack. You see? Another suspense. And in Sarah's case, we can, add another suspense saying that although Sarah is able to admit or get enrolled in a GED prep class, but the money that was obtained by selling the bike is enough for only 2 of the 4 tests. Oh, where is she going to take the other 2 tests? Where is she going to find money from? Right? And so that is going to make the story a bit more interesting in both cases. But let's not do that. Let's not make those 2 suffer even more. So now the denouement, the resolution. The denouement of Jim's story, let's not make him paralyzed. Let's not make him end up in a worse situation than he was before this incident. And let's do some good for Sarah as well. So for Sarah's case, let's see. Let's just make her feel great again. Let's make her happy and say that, okay, finally, Sarah is admitted to a GED prep class, prep class. And if you want to continue this story, and if, let's say, if we were to make this story into series, we kind of add like the next episode follows GED prep classes like lasts for 2 years, and she has to be consistent and stay for 2 years, or 1 year or 6 months, or whatever time. We can say that. Can she do it? Can she work so hard for 2 years? Be so consistent for 1 year, maybe, or whatever. And anyway, in Jim's case, Jim is finally well again and sees his granddaughter. Did I say Isabella? Yes, okay. Isabella. And he is back home on his couch watching TV with Isabella, playing with her dolls in front of him. Great ending for both, right? Even though in Jim's case, he did not end up in a worse or better situation, but there was kind of a hint of him being in a worse situation than he was before this story, because after having 1 heart attack, your heart, if this is Jim's first heart attack, now Jim's heart is actually weaker than it was before the incident, and we can say, okay, Jim's back home and he's well. Jim is back. And he is well. Oh, his health is back to normal again. Wow. You see, just in the span of this class's time, we have created 2 different stories using the conventional structure. The conventional structure is really easy to use and really easy to come up with the stories for. So try to use it. If you want to, you can definitely use this structure to write some stories. And if you want to be a writer, maybe this is the structure that you should start with, and later on you might be able to come up with some really creative ideas to introduce all these parts in different parts of the story and make the stories more interesting. By the way, in inciting incident, in unconventional ways, you will always see hints. Something that will definitely either answer or keep the story unresolved, incomplete, and you might feel like, you'll have to either see the next movie or read the next book in order to really understand why things happened and how things happened and how things resolved. So the pyramid, this is, as I mentioned here, this is the exposition, right? And also this is where the conflict is also introduced. This is the inciting incident, something happens. Let's call it incident only. Okay, this is rising action. And this is the climax. This is falling action and moment of final suspense, and finally denouement, so resolution. Okay. This is like a pyramid, even though it doesn't seem this. It's a Jim's story, or Jim's heart attack, or Sarah's quest, or obtaining high school equivalence, or high school equivalent diploma, or high school equivalency diploma. Anyway, let's read this story together. I hope we have enough time to go through this story and talk about all the incidents happening in this story. So let's read this story together. I'm going to read it out loud. And I hope you all read with me. And if you have any questions, again, write the questions down in the chat box, and I hope I will be able to answer all of them during this class. And if you have time, by the way, after this, we'll go to the Notion page, our Notion site, and you will see what things have been added to the site. Anyway, so let's read this story. As far as Justin knew, there was only one way out of his neighborhood: basketball. So he ran with the ball like the hounds were chasing him. This basically means, he couldn't give up the ball and he ran really fast. He could drop any of the older guys at the court in a blaze of crossovers, fadeaways, and finger rolls. And the younger guys didn't stand a chance. Justin saw his way out and he ran for it. But the world has a funny way of changing right when you think you've got things figured out. You see, the scene or the story is exposed to set up. And through this really interesting reference, the author actually wants to introduce a conflict. But the world has a funny way of changing right when you think you've got things figured out. And that's just what happened to Justin. One day, when Justin was shooting around at the local course, some guys from another block ran up and asked to play. The big one in the middle said that he had heard that Justin was the best and he wanted to see if it was true. Justin said, "No, man, I'm just shooting around with my cousin. I ain't trying to get all sweet right now." That's my Americanism, I think. Anyway, yes, we know up until now, something is going to happen, right? because of the reference that the author made by saying the world has a funny way of changing right when you think you've got things figured out. And that's just what happened, Jim. You know something is going to go wrong, or something wrong is going to happen, or something really bad is going to happen to Justin. But the big guy was insistent, and Justin's cousin was bugging. Come on, Justin, drop this guy. So Justin figured that he'd just do what everyone wanted and play. Justin was running all over the big guy and making his shots while he did it. Running over the big guy and making shots while he did it. But just as the outcome of the game seemed certain, the big guy shoved Justin as he went for a layup. Yeah, she wants to kind of basketball, I don't know what they do in basketball. So Justin went flying in such a way that he managed to tear up his right knee. By the way, this is where I am. Maybe I should highlight. Okay. Right knee. So the doctor said Justin might never play again, and if he did play, he wouldn't play the same. Justin was devastated. The first 6 weeks, Justin laid in bed with his leg in a long cast, feeling like a broomstick. Wow, something bad has happened. The incident has been introduced or incited, and the climax of this story has been introduced as well. See, the doctor telling Justin that he's not going to be playing. This is a rising action, and him for the next 6 weeks, a little bit longer, feeling like a broomstick. This is the climax of this story. This is the highest point of tension in Justin's injury story. He watched 3 reruns of The Simpsons every day and ate potato chips until the bag was empty. And then he'd dig the salt and grease out of the corner with his index finger. Justin blew up like a balloon as he watched his once bright future fade away. He got fat. Right. Oh, this is kind of just explaining, informing the reader about the climax, about what the worst situation for the main character looks like. Right when he reached the bottom of the pit of despair, Justin's sister, oh, this is falling action. Right when Sister Kiki came home from the university. She came in the house like a ray of sunshine, bringing exciting tales of faraway land called college. Justin was amazed and intrigued by the dorm room dramas and campus craziness that Kiki told, but he could hardly believe any of it. It was as if she were telling him about some fantasy land high above the clouds. Justin gazed off dreamily as she spoke. Justin, she interrupted his daydream. Let me see your progress report. Justin was ashamed. His grades had really slumped since his injury. Oh no, this won't do, Jay, she said. You are going to have to get these up. Well, Justin was a stubborn guy, but his older sister had a way of getting him to do things that nobody else could. You see, this is falling action, meaning that, oh, something good is going to happen. Up until this point, everything has been going really badly for the main character. So while she was home on break, they studied together, and they talked, and they worked, and Justin felt better than he ever had before. After spending those weeks with his sister, Justin realized that he didn't want to feel bad for himself anymore. Ah, great. And he didn't want to quit. Basketball used to be his thing, and he was good at it. But now there was only school. So he had to be. He had to be good. He had to get good at that. Justin passed through all his classes like a half-court tramp. Again, basketball reference, which I think is a good thing that he passed through all of his classes like that. Okay, by the time he got to senior year in high school, his GPA was hovering in the slam dunk position. This is, I think, where they stand for. The last thing that Justin had to do to get into the college of his choice was score well on the SAT. He said this is kind of a moment of final suspense, as we mentioned. Oh, is he going to score? Is he going to get a high score on his ACT test as well? Oh, this is ACT, not SAT. Oh, so, well, wouldn't you know, using the study skills Justin had acquired from his sister, Justin scored a 24 on the ACT. That's not the highest score a person can get, but it was high enough for Justin. Now he had his academic game together. Though the recruiters never came to Justin's door, every university that he applied to get accepted. And when the fall came, Justin had his choice in colleges. Though he had missed his family, Justin decided to enroll in the sunniest university in Hawaii. And nobody could say that Justin made a bad choice. Okay, now we have read this story. Great. Let's go into the next slide and talk about different points in this story. Okay, everything I think is set up. Great. As far as Justin knew, this is the exposition. This is where the exposition starts, right? And he ran this everything in the exposition part of the structure, mentioning or explaining what the situation was like before something else happened, or before the bad thing happened. So now Finger rose younger, Justin saw his way out and he ran for it, the world. And this is where one of the conflicts is introduced, saying that, oh, something bad is going to happen. And this is where, explaining how the incident is getting incited, or is being incited, or is being introduced. So the big one in the middle said that he had heard of Justin. Great. No, and this kind of telling you, oh, this is where things will go wrong, or wrongly. So Justin felt that he'd just do what everyone wanted and play. Oh, this is where the kind of the conflict, the introduction of conflict, is ended and ends. And this is where the actual incident, or how the actual incident happened, is explained in this part of this text, right? This is called the inciting incident part. And then this is the incident itself. The really bad thing. And now, the doctor said Justin might never play again. So he wouldn't play the same. This is rising action. This is kind of making the situation worse. So kind of, this is taking the story to its highest point of tension. Okay. And now Justin was devastated. Justin was devastated. The first 6 weeks, Justin just laid in bed with his leg in a long cast, feeling like a broomstick. That's a really bad situation to be in. Okay, this is the climax. This is the worst it can get for the main character. And this is the worst it gets in this story for the main character. He got fat. He was an athlete. He could play basketball really well. You know, he was considered to be one of the best in the neighborhood, and he thought that is his way out of the neighborhood. But unfortunately, something really bad happened, and now he is in this situation. This really, really bad situation, the worst situation he could ever imagine himself to be in. And now this is where falling action is introduced. This is where there is something hopeful for Justin about to happen. And Kiki came from university. She came in the house like a ray of sunshine. See, if her coming into the house were described, let's say negatively, then we'd know she's going to come with another bad news, right? And make this story worse. But bringing exciting tales of a faraway land called college. Oh, we know that things are going to get better for Justin, at least up to this point of the story. If this was a tragic story, then we see Justin would prepare for the test, prepare for study during high school and prepare for ACT. But he would not be able to pass the test, and he would fail all the important tests, and he would not be able to go to college and play basketball because of his injury. And then in the end, Justin would be working, somewhere. I don't want to mention any job, not to disrespect them. But anyway, Justin would end in the worst situation possible. Justin was amazed and intrigued by the dorm room traumas and campus craziness that Kiki told, but he could hardly believe in it. This is where falling action, kind of something hopefully is going to happen. And then, especially here, where Justin was a stubborn guy, but his older sister had a way of getting him to do things that nobody else could. We know that she has been successful in convincing Justin to study harder and get his grades higher. Okay, so while she was home, they did these really great things, and this is where Justin starts feeling better, and he is feeling better than he had ever before. And after spending those weeks with his sister, didn't want to feel bad for himself. Now things are getting better for Justin, and falling action is this. And now moment of final suspense is this. He has to get a high score on the ACT. And this is where the final suspense is also overcome. And it's clear that now Justin, maybe he has not got the highest score, but he has a score that he can go to university. And he has chosen Hawaii to be the university, his sunniest place. Excuse me for that. And with that, we know how the story ended. It's up to the reader to decide whether Justin ended up in a worse situation or better situation than he was before. But from my point of view, he ended maybe in a slightly worse situation than he was before. If he was as good as he is told here, No, I think you'll definitely be a really great vice president and live a lot more comfortable life. Anyway, maybe it's really great that this happened. Just now, he's going to be, and he's going to achieve some really great things academically, hopefully. Okay, that is the story structure. And if you have any questions, but by the way, on Mentimeter, there was a question. Or I go on and ask you to ask. So future questions. The question was about how in the
So reject.
share, please let me know when you see it. Great. You can see it. Okay, this is the Notion page that I've been talking about so much. This is the link which I will send you right now. Right? So when you go to this link, you don't need any account. This is just a web page. You go here and you will see all these sessions. Right now, this is the timeline. Today is 2. You can click on today and go to today, and the next session is going to be on 7, and the session after that, we are not going to have a session on 9, but we are going to have a session on 14. See, this is everything you need about the dates and time. This America's YouTube channel link. If you click on this, and let's go here. I hope you see. This is the America's YouTube link, YouTube channel, and here this is the Zoom meeting link. And please go through the announcement sessions we have got so far. Okay, this is where I make the announcements, and this is where you can find these sessions. So if you click in here, session 1, you see this, like the YouTube video that you find on here on At America's YouTube channel. You can find all those videos. Of course, you won't have to go through the whole channel to find these videos. The videos are embedded in here, so you can go to session 8. This is the last session that we had. You can just click it and play it full screen. Yep, this is Notion, and if you have any questions, you can definitely go and explore it on your own and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And that's it for today.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation today, and I hope everyone gained a lot of new knowledge and insight from today's session. I would also like to thank our facilitator
So
for.
let me see what the question is. So you can click on any previous sessions. Yes, maybe I should share my screen again. So this is what you can do. This is what you can do. You can just let's say I want to watch session 3. I'll just click on here and I'll be taken to the session, and you can make a full screen. Anyway, that's it. Thank you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation today, and I hope everyone gained a lot of new knowledge and insight from today's session. I would also like to thank our facilitator today for sharing your knowledge with us. Earlier in this event, we asked our audience members a trivia question, and the question was, what is the average percentage of people who pass the GED test every year? The answer is B, 85%. Shout out goes to Arda Bayu from Instagram for answering the question correctly, and thank you for everyone else who has participated. Also, please don't forget to follow us on our social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at AP America. And please also subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel. All right, with that, I think it is time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining our session for today. My name is Andrea, and see you at the next at America Ina. Thank you.